Rey's connection to the Skywalker legacy has been a subject of significant intrigue and speculation in the Star Wars universe. Her journey from an isolated scavenger on Jakku to one of the most powerful figures in the galaxy raises a number of questions about her mysterious heritage. The Skywalkers, of course, are a family whose legacy is intertwined with the Force in a way that no other family in the galaxy can claim. From Anakin Skywalker, who was believed to be the chosen one, to his children, Luke Skywalker and Leia Organa, who played pivotal roles in the galactic struggle against the Empire, the Skywalkers have always been at the heart of the galaxy's fate. Rey's own connection to this family, however, is not immediately apparent. Unlike Luke, who was raised knowing his lineage, Rey spent the early years of her life unaware of her true heritage. Her discovery of her place within the broader Skywalker narrative, especially as it unfolded in the sequel trilogy, remains one of the most compelling aspects of her character and the overarching story of Star Wars. At the core of Rey's journey is the idea of identity, specifically, who Rey is and what legacy she carries. When audiences are first introduced to Rey in The Force Awakens, she is presented as an orphan on the desert planet of Jakku, surviving by scavenging remnants from the past. Rey's isolated existence and the mystery surrounding her parents form the central part of her early character arc. Her desire to find her place in the galaxy, to belong somewhere, is apparent throughout the film. She is a person lost in the cosmos, much like the galaxy itself, which is reeling from the aftermath of the Empire's fall and the rise of the First Order. This sense of loss, of not knowing her past, mirrors the galaxy's own struggle to heal and move forward after decades of galactic war. The film sets up Rey as a character who, despite her potential, remains uncertain of her true origin and heritage. As Rey's journey unfolds, the mystery of her parentage deepens. Initially, there are suggestions that Rey's connection to the Skywalker family may be more direct, with whispers of her being Luke Skywalker's daughter or even a descendant of Leia Organa. In The Last Jedi, Rey's confrontation with Kylo Ren in the Cave of the Dark Side amplifies this mystery, revealing that her lineage may be less important than her inherent connection to the Force. Kylo Ren tells Rey that she is no one, that her parents were nobody, and yet she is still deeply connected to the Force, potentially indicating that the Skywalker legacy is not bound by bloodlines alone. This revelation challenges Rey's understanding of herself and her place within the galaxy's larger narrative, forcing her to grapple with her identity beyond her heritage. It also opens up the possibility that Rey's true power is innate, not inherited from any one individual or family. This theme is central to her journey, as she comes to realize that her connection to the Skywalker legacy is not about the past, but about her choices and actions in the present. Rey, rather than being a product of her lineage, is defined by the choices she makes as an individual. However, Rey's true connection to the Skywalker legacy is not fully revealed until The Rise of Skywalker, where her identity and heritage are at last clarified. Here, it is revealed that Rey is the granddaughter of Emperor Palpatine, a revelation that shocks both Rey and the audience. This connection initially seems to distance Rey from the Skywalker family, positioning her as the heir to the dark legacy of Palpatine himself. Yet, rather than embracing this dark legacy, Rey rejects it and ultimately takes on the mantle of the Skywalker name, adopting it as her own. This decision marks the culmination of her journey, as Rey chooses to define herself by her actions and her beliefs, rather than by the blood that runs through her veins. It's a powerful moment that highlights the ongoing theme of free will versus destiny in the Star Wars saga. Rey's decision to embrace the Skywalker legacy as her own is not a product of her bloodline, but a result of her actions, her choices, and the sacrifice she makes to protect the galaxy. Her connection to the Skywalker family is not based on ancestry, but on the ideals and values that the Skywalkers represent, values such as selflessness, hope, and redemption. Rey's relationship with the Skywalker family is not confined to bloodlines or lineage. Instead, it is a symbolic connection, one that resonates with the broader themes of the Star Wars saga. Her connection to Luke Skywalker is perhaps the most significant in The Force Awakens. When Rey first finds Luke's lightsaber, it is as though she is being called to something greater. The lightsaber, once wielded by Anakin Skywalker and later by Luke, becomes a symbol of Rey's connection to the Skywalker legacy. However, it's not just a weapon. It represents the hope that the Skywalkers have always embodied. Luke Skywalker serves as both a mentor and a symbol of what Rey could become, a Jedi who resists the dark side and fights for the greater good. Throughout The Last Jedi, Rey seeks Luke's guidance, hoping that he will take up the mantle once again and help her unlock her full potential. But Luke's reluctance to train Rey stems from his own doubts about the legacy of the Skywalker family and the consequences of power. In the end, however, it is Luke's redemption, his self-sacrifice in the face of overwhelming odds, that becomes the defining lesson for Rey. His ultimate act of sacrifice inspires Rey to take on the Skywalker mantle herself, proving that the legacy of the Skywalkers is not about their bloodlines, but about the values they represent. Rey's connection to Leia Organa also plays a pivotal role in her development and her eventual adoption of the Skywalker name. While Leia is not Rey's biological mother, she becomes a mother figure to Rey, guiding her in the ways of the Force and offering the wisdom and strength that Rey needs. The deep bond between them highlights the idea that the Skywalker legacy is about family, not just biological ties, but the relationships we form through shared values, struggles, and sacrifices. In The Rise of Skywalker, Leia's death is one of the most poignant moments of the saga, and her passing serves as the final catalyst for Rey's transformation. Leia's belief in Rey, her unwavering faith in her as the heir to the Skywalker legacy, helps Rey realize that her connection to the family is not about lineage, but about the choices she makes. This revelation is also reflected in the symbolic passing of the Skywalker lightsaber from Leia to Rey, signifying the official transfer of the legacy. In a final act of redemption, Rey chooses to honor Leia's legacy by embracing the Skywalker name as her own. In this way, Rey's connection to the Skywalkers is not just a product of her bloodline, but of her actions, her choices, and her unwavering belief in hope. Rey's mysterious connection to the Skywalker legacy is therefore both a literal and symbolic journey. It is a journey that spans her discovery of her true heritage, her mentorship by Luke and Leia, and her eventual choice to claim the Skywalker name as her own. It is a story that mirrors the overarching themes of Star Wars, the tension between fate and free will, the power of hope, and the importance of choice in shaping one's destiny. Ultimately, Rey's connection to the Skywalkers is not about the bloodline she carries, but about the values she chooses to embrace and the legacy she wishes to leave behind. She is not simply the heir to a legacy of war and conquest, but the heir to a legacy of redemption, hope, and selflessness. Through her journey, Rey proves that it is not where we come from that defines us, but the choices we make that determine who we become. We delve deeper into Rey's mysterious connection to the Skywalker legacy, specifically examining the intricacies of her relationship with key Skywalker figures, Luke Skywalker, Leia Organa, and the legacy she ultimately inherits. Through this exploration, we will understand how Rey's journey unfolds not just as a quest for personal identity, but as an essential part of the Skywalker story itself. Rey's initial encounter with Luke Skywalker in The Force Awakens sets the stage for one of the most significant relationships in her life. Luke, having withdrawn from the galaxy after his failure with Ben Solo, is deeply disconnected from the Jedi and the legacy of the Skywalkers. When Rey seeks him out on the remote planet of Ahch-To, she is met with a reluctant and disillusioned figure. This Luke Skywalker is not the hopeful and triumphant hero of the previous films. Rather, he is a man burdened by his past and filled with doubt. His betrayal of Kylo Ren, formerly Ben Solo, and his fleeing from the galaxy after the destruction of the Jedi Order have left him with a fractured sense of purpose. For Rey, however, this initial meeting is transformative. Luke's legacy is incomplete, and in his retreat, Rey sees both his greatness and his flaws. The tension in their relationship stems from Luke's belief that the Jedi and his family's legacy of conflict were ultimately doomed, but it is this very legacy that Rey seeks to revive. The crux of their relationship centers around Rey's role as a potential successor to the Skywalker legacy. Unlike Luke, Rey is not initially aware of her family history or the implications of her connection to the Skywalkers. She is motivated by an internal sense of destiny, an innate connection to the Force, and an urgent need to confront the darkness represented by the First Order and Kylo Ren. Her journey of self-discovery begins with her belief that Luke can help her understand her place within the larger narrative of the galaxy. But Luke's denial and eventual rejection of her seem to push Rey further into herself, questioning whether she will be able to carry the mantle of the Skywalkers without him. What becomes clear over the course of The Last Jedi is that Rey's potential does not lie in simply being a mirror of the past. Rey's connection to the Skywalkers is not simply about inheritance, but about choice. Her vision in the Cave of the Dark Side exposes this idea. She is nobody in terms of lineage, but her power and strength come from her ability to choose who she becomes. Luke's legacy, which is rooted in the idea of redemption, both personal and universal, cannot be passed down through blood alone. Rey's own journey exemplifies this. She has the power to reshape the Skywalker story, not by following in their footsteps, but by making a distinct path of her own. This independence from traditional lineage defines her as the heir to the Skywalker name, because she represents a break from the cycles of violence that have often plagued the family. Her decision to reject Kylo Ren's offer of ruling together and instead choosing the path of hope mirrors the choices made by the Skywalkers in previous generations. Decisions to choose light over dark, to sacrifice for the good of others, and to redefine what it means to be a Jedi. One of the most important revelations in The Rise of Skywalker comes when Rey learns of her true parentage, her biological connection to Emperor Palpatine. This revelation, initially shocking to Rey, sets up the thematic clash of the trilogy, the fight not between the light and dark, but between fate and free will. Rey is a granddaughter of Palpatine, whose dark legacy is one of domination and destruction, yet she does not inherit his nature. Instead, Rey chooses to embrace the Skywalker name, embodying the idea that the Skywalker legacy is not determined by genetics, but by action, choices, and the willingness to fight for good. By claiming the Skywalker name, Rey redefines the legacy of the Skywalkers. She does not simply inherit their power, but chooses to honor it in her own way, understanding that legacy is shaped by what we do, rather than by who we are born to be. Her acceptance of the Skywalker name is an act of redemption, not just for herself, but for the entire Skywalker line, which had been marred by tragedy, hubris, and darkness. Rey's connection to the Skywalker legacy is ultimately one of personal growth, transformation, and understanding. She is the culmination of the lessons taught by both Luke and Leia, though she never fully knew them as family. Luke's teachings about the dangers of fear, attachment, and the importance of hope are critical in Rey's journey towards self-realization. Leia, too, plays an essential part in Rey's development. As a leader of the Resistance, Leia teaches Rey not just about force sensitivity, but about the importance of sacrifice, compassion, and the courage to stand up for what is right. Rey's connection to Leia is particularly poignant, as the two women form a powerful mentor-student relationship based not on familial ties, but on shared purpose. The death of Leia in The Rise of Skywalker is a turning point for Rey, as it signifies that Rey's journey is no longer just about honoring the Skywalkers, but about becoming one in her own right. Rey's final act of claiming the Skywalker name at the end of The Rise of Skywalker encapsulates her entire journey. While she was once uncertain of her place in the galaxy, unsure of who she truly was and where she came from, she ultimately chooses to be a Skywalker, because she understands that the Skywalker legacy is not just about power or bloodline, but about the choices made in moments of greatest adversity. Her willingness to step forward, to embody hope, and to carry the torch of the Skywalker family signifies the passing of the baton from one generation to the next. This transition from the old to the new signifies that the Skywalkers are no longer defined by their sorrows or failures, but by their resilience, sacrifice, and redemption. Rey's connection to the Skywalker legacy is one of profound complexity and significance. While her heritage is initially shrouded in mystery, her ultimate journey transcends the question of bloodlines. Rey's identity is defined not by who her parents were, but by the choices she makes. Her decision to embrace the Skywalker name as her own, her rejection of the dark legacy offered by Kylo Ren, and her willingness to carry the burden of hope for the galaxy. Rey's story is a testament to the enduring power of self-determination, redemption, and the power of choice in shaping our identity. She embodies the idea that legacy is not something imposed upon us, but something we create through our actions and our beliefs. Her connection to the Skywalker family is ultimately one of rebirth. It is not simply a continuation of the Skywalker bloodline, but a transformation, a passing of the torch from one generation to the next, from warriors to hope-bearers. Rey becomes a new kind of Skywalker, one whose legacy will be defined not by the mistakes of the past, but by her ability to choose the path of peace, compassion, and sacrifice. Building on Rey's mysterious connection to the Skywalker legacy, we now explore how Rey's impact on the galaxy is not just confined to the personal transformation she undergoes, but also reflects larger themes in the Star Wars saga. Her journey symbolizes hope and the constant struggle to define oneself outside the shadows of expectation and bloodlines. In doing so, Rey redefines the concept of what it means to carry the Skywalker name into the future. One of the most significant aspects of Rey's journey is the concept of family and how it extends beyond biological ties. In Star Wars, family has always been a central theme, from the Skywalker family's influence on galactic events to the founding of the Jedi Order. Family, however, is not simply defined by blood relations. It is defined by shared experiences, sacrifices, and the bonds forged through love, respect, and shared ideals. Rey, despite being initially isolated and seemingly disconnected from any family, gradually forms a new family, one that includes the Skywalkers, the Resistance, and even Ben Solo, Kylo Ren, whose ultimate redemption becomes a pivotal moment in Rey's acceptance of her role in the galaxy. Her connection to the Skywalkers transcends her biological lineage and speaks to the broader idea of what it means to be part of a larger community of people who stand together for a common cause. While Rey's desire for belonging is initially tied to her search for her parents, it ultimately evolves into her adoption of the Skywalker name, not because it is her birthright, but because she chooses it. This choice is incredibly significant within the context of the Star Wars saga. A key aspect of Rey's journey is her relationship with Kylo Ren Ben Solo. Kylo Ren represents the dark side of the Skywalker legacy, a legacy tainted by Anakin's fall to the dark side and Palpatine's influence. While Rey initially seeks to defeat Kylo Ren in a traditional sense, their relationship takes a more complex turn as they discover their connection through the Force. Their Force bond allows them to communicate across great distances, and this connection ultimately plays a significant role in their development as characters. For Rey, this bond symbolizes the tension between light and dark, and it is through her choice to reject the dark side that she is able to redeem Kylo Ren, showing that the legacy of the Skywalkers, for all its tragedy, also contains the power of redemption and self-determination. In The Rise of Skywalker, Rey's final confrontation with Palpatine and her eventual rejection of his dark influence further solidifies her place as the true heir to the Skywalker legacy. The key moment in this final battle is when Rey draws on the strength of the Skywalkers and the wisdom of those who came before her. Luke's ghost, Leia's legacy, and the lessons they imparted guide her in this final confrontation, where she is able to channel the power of her ancestors and confront the Emperor. This climactic moment is not just about defeating Palpatine, but about defining her own destiny and choosing the future she will create. Rey's ability to defeat the Emperor is a direct reflection of her personal growth and acceptance of the Skywalker legacy. But it is also a statement that legacy is not determined by blood or ancestry. It is defined by who we choose to be and the choices we make in our moments of greatest challenge. Throughout Star Wars, there is a constant tension between the concepts of destiny and choice. Rey's story highlights this tension in the most profound way. She is initially presented as an isolated figure, lost in the galaxy and struggling to find her place. But over time, she discovers that her true strength lies not in who she is born to be, but in who she chooses to become. Her connection to the Skywalker legacy is not determined by blood, but by the choices she makes throughout her journey. Choices to reject the darkness, to embrace the light, and to ultimately carry the torch of the Skywalkers into the future. This shift from destiny to choice is central to Rey's growth as a character and is reflective of the overarching themes of Star Wars. The idea that we are not defined by our past or family, but by our actions, decisions, and willingness to grow. Rey's connection to the Skywalkers is not one of mere inheritance, but of self-definition. The legacy she inherits is not one of sorrows and tragedies, but of resilience, hope, and the possibility of redemption. She proves that the true strength of the Skywalker legacy lies not in power, but in compassion, sacrifice, and the ability to make the right choices in the face of overwhelming darkness. In choosing to embrace the Skywalker name and honor their ideals, Rey becomes a new kind of Skywalker, one who represents the possibility of breaking free from the mistakes of the past and choosing to build a future defined by hope and light. The Skywalker legacy is no longer a burden to carry, but a gift to be passed on, a gift that lives on in Rey's choices and in the new path she will carve out for the galaxy. As Rey solidifies her connection to the Skywalker legacy, her impact on the galaxy becomes not just personal but universal. By embracing the ideals of the Jedi, hope and sacrifice, Rey breaks the chains of her lineage, transforming the legacy of the Skywalkers from one of darkness and struggle to one of light, redemption, and unity. In many ways, Rey represents the future of the Force, a future where the light side is not about absolute control or power, but about finding balance and harmony in a galaxy that has been torn apart by war, betrayal, and destruction. Rey's journey is not just about her becoming a Jedi, but about her defining her own path within the larger galactic narrative. Her decision to embrace the Skywalker name is the final piece of her journey towards self-actualization. It is symbolic not of her ancestry, but of the legacy she chooses to leave behind. Throughout the sequel trilogy, Rey constantly faces questions about her parentage and her place in the galaxy, and it is through her actions that she discovers who she truly is. The galaxy at large may have doubted her abilities, questioned her lineage, and even feared what she might become, but Rey proves that she is not bound by the past. Instead, she is the embodiment of the future, showing that one's destiny is not determined by where they come from, but by the choices they make along the way. The Skywalker legacy has long been characterized by conflict. Most notably, the rise and fall of Anakin Skywalker and the subsequent redemption of his son Luke Skywalker. This narrative is about the constant push and pull between the light and dark sides of the Force, a cycle that seems to repeat itself within the family. Anakin's fall to the dark side and his eventual redemption at the hands of his son Luke sets the foundation for the family's legacy. But Rey breaks this cycle by rejecting both the dark side and the idea that she is fated to be a victim of her lineage. Instead, she chooses to embrace her own identity as a Skywalker, breaking free from the past and creating a new legacy for herself. Her connection to the Skywalker family becomes an allegory for the Force itself, a force of balance. Anakin Skywalker was born from the Force and was believed to be the chosen one, destined to bring balance. However, his own path toward balance was marred by his internal conflict and eventual fall. Luke Skywalker, his son, played a pivotal role in the restoration of that balance. Rey's involvement in this cycle is significant, as she represents the culmination of the prophecy, but not in the traditional sense. She is not the product of predestination, but the product of choice. Her role is not to destroy the dark side, but to show that the Force does not have to be balanced through destruction or domination, but rather through understanding, compassion, and wisdom. Rey's connection to the Skywalkers, then, is not about inheriting their power, but about creating a new path forward, one where the light is not an opposite to the dark, but a balance that includes both and transcends them. A key part of Rey's development is her evolving relationship with Kylo Ren Ben Solo. The Force bond between them is not only a plot device, but a manifestation of the conflict Rey faces within herself. Rey is torn between two ideologies: the legacy of the Skywalkers, which teaches hope and sacrifice, and the lure of the dark side, which offers power and certainty, but at the cost of losing oneself. Kylo Ren represents the temptation of the dark side, and in their moments of communication, Rey is given the opportunity to understand the dark side's seductive nature, while also seeing its destructive effects. Their connection forces Rey to confront the darkness within herself, not because she is inherently bad, but because the dark side offers an easy path to power, something Rey has struggled with throughout her journey. Rey's greatest triumph comes not in her battle against Kylo Ren or Palpatine, but in her decision to reject the path of easy power and instead choose love, compassion, and forgiveness, the true traits of the Skywalker legacy. By accepting her true heritage, not just as a Palpatine but as a Skywalker, Rey redefines what it means to carry the Skywalker name. She does not simply inherit the family's strengths or weaknesses, but instead creates her own path. This idea of creating one's destiny is central to Rey's character and to the Star Wars saga as a whole. While the saga often focuses on the tension between fate and free will, Rey's journey emphasizes that, in the end, our choices define us, not our heritage or our bloodline. Her ultimate confrontation with Palpatine is the culmination of her journey toward understanding what the Skywalker legacy truly means. Palpatine, the embodiment of darkness, is bent on using Rey to destroy the galaxy and return to power. However, Rey's decision to embrace her Skywalker lineage, combined with her ability to choose compassion over fear, sets her apart from the Sith and Palpatine. This is no longer a battle for dominance, but a battle for the soul of the galaxy, and Rey's victory comes from her ability to choose hope, forgiveness, and the light. By doing so, she not only destroys Palpatine, but also ends the cycle of violence and hatred that has defined the Skywalker legacy for so long. Rey's story demonstrates that while bloodlines carry weight, it is the individual's choices that shape the galaxy's future. In the final moments of the rise of Skywalker, when Rey adopts the Skywalker name, she signifies the closure of the Skywalker saga. But this closure is not one of finality. Instead, it is a reopening of possibilities, a new future where the legacy of the Skywalkers is defined not by their ability to dominate, but by their capacity to choose redemption and love over power. Rey's acceptance of the Skywalker name is a symbolic passing of the torch, a reminder that the legacy of the Skywalkers is not about their past failures or triumphs, but about the choices they make in the face of unprecedented challenges. Rey's journey through the Star Wars sequel trilogy is defined by a search for belonging, a quest to understand her place in a galaxy that is still reeling from the collapse of the Empire and the rise of the First Order. The legacy of the Skywalker family is the cornerstone of this story, a complex web of light and dark, heroism and tragedy. For Rey, the connection to the Skywalker legacy is at first an enigma, something she cannot fully comprehend or even identify. The mystery of her parentage looms over her, but it is not the key to understanding her true connection to the Skywalkers. Instead, her journey reveals that her connection is not about bloodline, but about choice and action. When Rey first sets out on her path, her only goal is to find her place in the galaxy, a place where she belongs. On Jakku, Rey survives by scavenging remnants of the old Empire, alone and abandoned. She has no knowledge of her parents, no understanding of her Force potential, and little idea of the larger galactic conflict that is raging. However, even in her isolation, Rey displays an innate sense of strength, compassion, and independence. These qualities are not products of lineage, but of her choices. Rey's journey is not about discovering her family, it is about shaping her destiny, choosing how she will stand in the face of overwhelming darkness. Her decision to embrace the Skywalker name later in her journey is the culmination of this understanding. Legacy is not determined by blood, but by the choices one makes in the most difficult moments. From the very beginning, Rey's relationship with the Skywalkers is marked by ambiguity. In The Force Awakens, she seeks out Luke Skywalker, hoping that the legendary Jedi will help her understand her place and train her in the ways of the Force. Luke, however, is not the hero she expects. He is a figure of disillusionment and bitterness, having exiled himself after his failure with Ben Solo Kylo Ren. His reluctance to help Rey, and his belief that the Jedi Order should not be restored, presents an obstacle for Rey. She is thrust into an unfamiliar world of Jedi teachings, ancient wisdom, and galactic politics that she does not fully understand. But despite Luke's rejection, Rey's journey of discovery continues. She does not need to be molded into the image of Luke Skywalker or any other figure from history. Instead, Rey comes to realize that she can choose her own path, and that legacy is not something to be inherited, but something to be built from within. In The Last Jedi, Rey's identity crisis deepens. She learns that her parents were nobodies, which initially leads her to question her worth and her place in the galaxy. Kylo Ren's revelation that she is not part of any grand legacy appears to strip her of any connection to the Skywalkers or any other powerful lineage. This moment is pivotal because it challenges Rey's belief that her family heritage is tied to her worth. She must confront the reality that identity is not dictated by ancestry, but by choice. Rey's growing realization is that it is not where you come from that defines you, but what you decide to do with your abilities, your strengths, and your beliefs. Rey's connection to the Skywalker legacy is not about being born into greatness. It is about her decisions to embrace the qualities that the Skywalkers represent: hope, redemption, and resistance to tyranny. Rey's growth is marked by her evolving relationship with Kylo Ren. Kylo Ren, whose identity is torn between his Skywalker blood and his temptation by the dark side, is a reflection of the struggle Rey faces within herself. They are connected by the Force, and this connection allows them to communicate across distances. At first, Rey sees Kylo Ren as the enemy, the embodiment of everything she must oppose. But as their bond grows stronger, Rey begins to see the conflict within him. She realizes that, much like herself, Kylo Ren is not simply a product of his heritage, but a result of the choices he makes. Despite Kylo's repeated attempts to seduce Rey to the dark side, she resists, not because of some inherent goodness, but because she chooses to remain true to the light. This is the moment when Rey fully embraces her place within the Skywalker legacy, not as a direct descendant, but as a representative of the values the Skywalkers ultimately stood for. Rey understands that she is not bound by bloodline, but by choice and self-determination. In The Rise of Skywalker, Rey's true parentage is revealed. She is the granddaughter of Emperor Palpatine. This revelation is shocking and initially casts a shadow over her sense of self. Rey is faced with the reality that her grandfather was one of the most feared and evil figures in the galaxy. The dark side runs through her veins, but Rey's response is not one of acceptance or succumbing to her heritage. Instead, she rejects it. This rejection is key to her transformation. By choosing to embrace the Skywalker name, she demonstrates that legacy is not defined by blood, but by action. Rey's ultimate decision to take on the Skywalker name is an act of rebirth, an assertion that the Skywalker legacy does not have to be one of darkness and destruction, but of hope, courage, and redemption. The final battle between Rey and Palpatine is not just a clash of dark and light, but a clash of legacies. Palpatine, representing the dark side and the destruction of the galaxy, seeks to use Rey to fulfill his twisted vision of restoring the Sith to power. But Rey's decision to choose the light, to reject the temptation of the dark side, and to embrace the Skywalker legacy ultimately leads to her victory. She draws upon the strength of the Skywalkers, particularly Luke and Leia, who both continue to guide her even after their deaths. The idea of the Skywalkers, both Luke's sacrifice and Leia's, becomes the defining power that Rey wields in her final battle. It is through her understanding of the Skywalker legacy that she is able to defeat Palpatine and prevent the rise of the Sith once again. Rey's final act in adopting the Skywalker name is symbolic of her journey from an isolated scavenger to a leader who defines her own legacy. By claiming the name of Skywalker, Rey takes ownership of the ideals and values the Skywalkers fought for, not because she is bound by blood, but because she chooses to become what they could not fully achieve, the symbol of hope and redemption for the galaxy. This transformation is not just about Rey defeating the past, but about creating a new future where the Skywalkers' legacy is no longer tainted by their failures and flaws, but is elevated by the choices Rey makes. The Skywalker legacy is not one of fate, but one of free will, and Rey's choices exemplify this lesson. By choosing the light and rejecting the dark, she redefines what it means to be a Skywalker and ensures that their legacy will continue, not through blood, but through the values they left behind. Rey's connection to the Skywalker legacy is therefore both a literal and symbolic one. While she is not the biological child of Luke or Leia, she is a direct successor to the legacy they represent, a legacy of resilience, redemption, and hope. Rey's journey proves that the legacy we inherit is not determined by our parents, but by the choices we make. Her decision to embrace the Skywalker name is the culmination of her journey, a moment where she accepts her place in the galaxy, not as a product of her bloodline, but as a symbol of what the Skywalkers could never fully achieve, a legacy defined not by conflict, but by compassion, sacrifice, and the hope for a better future. As we continue exploring Rey's mysterious connection to the Skywalker legacy, it's essential to focus on the broader implications of her journey for the galaxy and the legacy of the Jedi Order. Rey's transformation from an isolated scavenger to a powerful figure capable of leading the galaxy represents not just her individual growth, but the larger theme of hope and rebirth that runs throughout the Star Wars saga. Her role in bringing balance to the Force and ensuring the defeat of Palpatine carries profound implications for the galaxy, and it also signals the conclusion of the Skywalker saga, but one that leaves a new beginning in its wake. Rey's personal development is not only a testament to her internal struggle with identity and destiny, but also a reflection of the galactic struggle that unfolds throughout the sequel trilogy. Her path intersects with the rising power of the First Order, the Sith, and the enduring legacy of the Jedi Order. However, unlike many of the previous heroes in the saga, Rey is not born into the Jedi tradition. She is not raised by Jedi masters or trained in the ways of the Force from an early age. Instead, Rey learns about her potential through her own trials and experiences. This self-guided journey brings her to a powerful realization: being a Jedi is not about ancestry or destiny, but about the choices one makes. Rey's path serves as a contrast to the history of the Skywalkers, a family that has long been bound by their prophecies and their connections to the Force. In contrast, Rey's power is defined by self-determination and free will. She chooses to be part of the Jedi legacy, not because it is her birthright, but because it is what she believes is right. The development of Rey's connection to the Force is equally significant in understanding her place within the Skywalker legacy. When Rey first discovers her Force sensitivity, she is unaware of the true nature of her powers. It is only through her encounters with Luke, Leia, and Kylo Ren that she begins to understand the depth of her connection to the Force. Throughout her journey, Rey experiences several key moments where she must confront her fears, embrace her strengths, and ultimately accept her destiny as the wielder of the Skywalker legacy. For Rey, the Force is not something that controls her life. It is something she learns to embrace and harness in her quest to protect the galaxy. Through her struggles with Kylo Ren, Rey faces the most critical part of her development, the ability to balance the light and dark within herself. This internal conflict mirrors the Skywalker family's legacy, particularly Anakin's fall and Luke's eventual redemption. Both of these figures struggled with the pull of the dark side, and Rey's own journey serves as a mirror to their struggles. But with one critical difference: Rey chooses the light side, not because it is dictated by prophecy or fate, but because she decides to fight for the future. This internal conflict is explored most powerfully through Rey's connection with Kylo Ren. Their shared Force bond allows them to see one another as both enemies and allies, leading to the significant realization that both Rey and Kylo are reflections of one another. They share a profound connection not just through the Force, but through their internal struggles with identity and power. Kylo Ren, despite his Skywalker heritage, is consumed by the dark side and is struggling to find his place in the galaxy. His connection to Rey represents the temptation of the dark side, which Rey must ultimately resist. Rey, on the other hand, represents the light side, though she is not immune to the darker impulses that arise within her. Their relationship highlights the duality of the Skywalker legacy, the constant tension between the light and the dark, between fate and choice. Rey's ability to resist Kylo Ren's attempts to sway her toward the dark side is ultimately what defines her connection to the Skywalkers. It is her commitment to hope, redemption, and self-determination that allows her to break free from the cycle of violence and conquest that has long defined the Skywalker family. Rey's confrontation with Palpatine in The Rise of Skywalker serves as the culmination of her journey, not only because it represents the ultimate battle between light and dark, but also because it embodies the lesson that she has learned throughout the trilogy. Legacy is not about inherited power or bloodlines, but about choices and action. In her final battle with Palpatine, Rey is faced with the temptation to claim his power as her own, as Kylo Ren once offered her. But Rey refuses, knowing that true strength lies in self-sacrifice and the will to protect the galaxy. Her victory over Palpatine is symbolic, not only of her defeat of the Sith, but also of her rejection of the dark side. It is Rey's ability to channel the Skywalker legacy of hope and redemption that allows her to triumph, not through domination, but through selfless courage. Rey's final decision to adopt the Skywalker name in The Rise of Skywalker is the culmination of her transformation. The Skywalker legacy, once marked by conflict, is now one of peace, hope, and self-determination. Rey's decision is a symbolic passing of the torch, as she takes on the mantle of those who came before her, not because of her bloodline, but because of the values she has chosen to uphold. This moment signifies the end of the Skywalker saga, but also the beginning of a new era, one where the Skywalker name is no longer associated with violence and destruction, but with healing, compassion, and the protection of the galaxy. Rey's decision is a message to the galaxy that the legacy of the Skywalkers is not one of bloodline or fate, but one of choice, the choice to create a better future through selflessness and love. By the end of her journey, Rey has redefined the Skywalker legacy not through her bloodline, but through her actions. She has proven that anyone, regardless of their lineage, can shape the galaxy's future by choosing to embrace the light and the values of the Skywalkers, values that have always been about hope, redemption, and sacrifice. Rey's connection to the Skywalker legacy is the ultimate affirmation that what defines us is not our ancestry, but the choices we make in the face of adversity. She has taken the mantle of the Skywalkers and carried it forward into a new era, one where the legacy is no longer about the darkness of the past, but about the hope of the future. As Rey's journey progresses, her evolving relationship with Leia Organa becomes one of the most crucial aspects of her personal growth and connection to the Skywalker legacy. While Rey's immediate bond with Luke Skywalker represents a mentor-student dynamic revolving around training, guidance, and the revelation of her potential, her relationship with Leia is marked by a deeper sense of family and shared understanding. Leia, despite not being Rey's biological mother, plays an essential role in Rey's development, both as a leader of the Resistance and as a symbol of the Skywalker family's enduring hope and sacrifice. Leia's impact on Rey cannot be overstated. Throughout The Force Awakens and The Last Jedi, Rey is uncertain of her place in the galaxy. Though she has found a calling in the Resistance, she is still grappling with a profound sense of loneliness and identity crisis. Leia, who has herself experienced the trauma of war, loss, and the burden of leadership, offers Rey an invaluable form of mentorship. Leia sees in Rey a reflection of herself, someone who, despite lacking formal training, has the capacity for immense strength and leadership. Through Leia, Rey learns not only about the Force, but also about the heart of being a leader, standing for what is right, regardless of the cost. Leia's teachings guide Rey in understanding that strength is not just about power or battle tactics, but about resilience, empathy, and the courage to make sacrifices for the greater good. The mentorship that Leia provides is instrumental in helping Rey overcome the uncertainty she faces, showing her that her true legacy is not rooted in her parents or ancestry, but in her actions and her ability to make choices that contribute to the galaxy's healing. Leia's influence on Rey is also seen in their shared moments of loss and grief. Leia, having already suffered the loss of her son, Ben Solo Kylo Ren, is a figure of profound sacrifice. Her grief does not paralyze her. Instead, it propels her to continue fighting for the Resistance, for the future, and for the legacy of hope that the Skywalkers represent. Similarly, Rey experiences her own losses, particularly with the death of Han Solo, the figure who was a father figure to her, and a key part of her transformation into a leader in the Resistance. In The Rise of Skywalker, Leia's death becomes one of the most pivotal moments in the saga, not only marking the end of an era, but also catalyzing Rey's full acceptance of her role in the galaxy. As Leia's passing allows for the spiritual transmission of power, Rey's resolve is further solidified. Leia's death also strengthens Rey's connection to the Skywalker legacy, her family's legacy of sacrifice, redemption, and hope, and motivates her to rise to the challenge of confronting Palpatine, the embodiment of the dark side. This connection between Rey and Leia is particularly poignant because it shows that family in the Star Wars universe is not simply defined by blood, but by shared experiences and mutual growth. Leia and Rey's bond is a reflection of the larger thematic undercurrent in the saga, that legacy is not something we inherit from our parents or ancestors, but something we build through the decisions we make. Leia, who is both a Skywalker and a leader of the Resistance, sees in Rey the potential to continue the fight against tyranny and to shape the future of the galaxy. It is through Leia's guidance and faith in Rey that Rey ultimately comes to understand that being a Skywalker means more than inheriting a bloodline. It is about making the choice to fight for what is right, regardless of the odds. Leia's death also marks the passing of the torch from one generation to the next. She is the final Skywalker to truly embody the legacy of the family, holding the values of resilience, hope, and sacrifice at the core of her existence. But in her passing, she leaves behind a legacy of hope, one that Rey will continue to carry forward. The Skywalker family has long represented the duality of the Force, with figures like Anakin falling to the dark side, Luke struggling with his destiny, and Leia providing a constant source of light. But with Leia's passing, Rey must embrace the Skywalker legacy fully, facing the truth that she is not just Luke's student or Leia's protégé. She is the embodiment of the Skywalker's ideal, the belief that the Force should be used not for domination, but to protect, heal, and restore balance to the galaxy. Leia's final act of self-sacrifice is also mirrored in Rey's own actions at the end of The Rise of Skywalker. Both Leia and Rey have been defined by their ability to sacrifice for the greater good, and it is this trait that cements Rey as the true heir to the Skywalker legacy. When Rey ultimately faces Palpatine, the fight is not only for her own survival, but for the future of the galaxy. By choosing the Skywalker name, Rey takes on the mantle of leadership that Leia herself carried. This decision is not about bloodline, but about choosing to carry the torch of hope that the Skywalkers have passed down through generations. It is through her acceptance of this responsibility that Rey becomes the defining figure of the next generation of Jedi, one who represents balance and peace in a galaxy that has long been torn apart by conflict. Leia's influence on Rey's journey is profound, and it underscores a major theme of the sequel trilogy, that family is defined by the bonds we create, not just by our heritage. Rey's relationship with Leia, as well as her own journey to embrace the Skywalker name, highlights the importance of choosing one's legacy rather than simply inheriting it. This shift from bloodline to choice is what sets Rey apart from other figures in the saga, including the Skywalkers themselves, who were often burdened by the weight of their family's history and the expectations placed upon them. Rey does not need to prove herself as a Skywalker or as a Jedi. She simply needs to choose the path that aligns with her values, and that is the greatest lesson the Skywalkers teach her. In the end, Rey's strength comes from her willingness to stand on her own and choose hope over despair, love over fear, and sacrifice over power. As Rey's journey unfolds, it becomes clear that her relationship with Leia and Luke is only part of a much larger narrative in which her role in the galaxy and the Skywalker legacy takes on profound significance. In many ways, Rey represents the convergence of multiple key themes that have defined the entire Star Wars saga, but it is in her final act that we see how she fundamentally reshapes the Skywalker legacy and the future of the Jedi. Rey's choices, her resilience, and her embrace of the Force signal the dawn of a new era, one that does not rely on the past as a model for the future, but looks forward with hope and determination. Rey's ultimate confrontation with Palpatine marks the culmination of her entire journey. While Palpatine represents the dark side of the Force, the Emperor is also the culmination of the Skywalker legacy's darker elements. His manipulation of Anakin Skywalker and his pursuit of galactic domination are directly tied to the dark aspects of the Skywalker family's past. Anakin's fall to the dark side ultimately led to the creation of Palpatine's empire, and Palpatine's desire to use Rey as a vessel for his own power is a final twisted expression of the Sith's legacy. But Rey's victory over Palpatine is not just the defeat of the Sith. It is a victory for the Skywalker legacy, for hope, and for the galaxy's future. When Rey faces Palpatine in the final battle, she is not just fighting for her own survival, but for the entire galaxy. This battle is symbolic of the galaxy's struggle between the light and the dark, between hope and despair, and between self-determination and control. Palpatine represents everything that is oppressive and corrupt about the legacy of the Sith, his desire to manipulate, control, and destroy. In contrast, Rey embodies everything that is hopeful and redeeming about the Skywalker legacy, the ability to choose light, to sacrifice, and to defend the greater good. By refusing to succumb to Palpatine's temptation and instead choosing to stand against him, Rey proves that the Skywalker name is not simply a legacy of war or bloodlines, but one of redemption and hope for the future. A significant aspect of Rey's journey is her realization that the Force is not a tool to be controlled or mastered in the traditional sense, but something to be embraced and understood. This theme, present throughout the Star Wars saga, is most clearly articulated in The Last Jedi and is crystallized in The Rise of Skywalker. Rey's ability to choose hope over fear, to refuse the dark side, and to embrace the light is reflective of the larger theme of balance within the Force. She is not the first to struggle with the balance between the light and dark sides of the Force. Anakin Skywalker did so, as did Luke. But Rey's path is different because she chooses to create her own identity rather than be shaped by the past. In a direct contrast to the traditional Jedi teachings, which have always sought to maintain balance by suppressing attachments and emotions, Rey comes to understand that true balance lies in the ability to feel without being consumed by those feelings. Rey's relationships with Leia and Luke help her embrace attachment in a healthy, selfless way, understanding that love and connection to others are not weaknesses, but sources of strength. This is a significant shift from the more traditional Jedi teachings that often emphasize detachment and the renunciation of personal bonds. Rey's connection to the Skywalkers enables her to redefine the Jedi Order, not as one that seeks to eliminate attachments, but as one that embraces them in service of the greater good. Rey's leadership shows that it is not only strength that defines the Jedi, but also compassion, selflessness, and the ability to adapt to changing circumstances. Rey's connection to the Force also emphasizes another major theme of the Skywalker legacy, the power of the individual in shaping the galaxy's future. Both Luke and Anakin were seen as individuals whose destinies were intertwined with the galaxy's fate. Anakin was the chosen one, and Luke was the last hope of the Jedi. But Rey's journey teaches us that the galaxy's future does not rest on the destiny of any one person. Rey's connection to the Skywalker legacy is not about her being the chosen one or following a predetermined path. Instead, it is about the choices she makes, the choice to act, to fight for hope, and to reject the dark side. Her victory is not the result of fulfilling a prophecy or being fated to save the galaxy. It is the result of her own decisions, her self-awareness, and her willingness to choose light in the face of overwhelming darkness. This is a radical departure from the traditional Jedi prophecies that have often defined the fate of the galaxy, marking Rey as a new type of Jedi, one who is free from the constraints of destiny and bloodline. Rey's adoption of the Skywalker name in the final moments of The Rise of Skywalker represents the passing of the torch from the previous generation of Skywalkers to the next. Luke Skywalker's legacy has always been tied to his redemption of his father, Anakin Skywalker, and his defeat of the Empire. Leia Organa's legacy is one of leadership, sacrifice, and resistance to tyranny. Rey, in embracing the Skywalker name, signals the completion of the Skywalker saga, but also the beginning of a new chapter. While Rey may not be a biological Skywalker, she carries the essence of their legacy, hope, redemption, and the fight for peace. By taking the name of Skywalker, she is choosing to carry forward the values that the family has always represented, but in a way that transcends bloodlines and embraces a universal message of self-determination and balance. The galaxy that Rey inherits is one that has been scarred by centuries of war and oppression. The Empire, the Sith, and the First Order have all left their mark on the galaxy. But Rey's actions in the final battle signify that the galaxy is not beyond hope. The Skywalker legacy, which has been defined by struggle and conflict, is now redefined by Rey's choices, choices that are rooted in peace, compassion, and the understanding that the future is not dictated by the past, but by the decisions we make in the present. As Rey steps into the legacy of the Skywalkers, one of the most significant aspects of her journey is the redefinition of the Jedi in a post-Palpatine galaxy. The Jedi Order has always been a central element in the Star Wars saga, but it is often portrayed as a dogmatic institution bound by rules that sometimes hindered their ability to act in the galaxy's best interest. The Jedi's relationship with the Force has been one of balance, but the orders and restrictions they placed upon their members led to the downfall of the Order itself. This rigid structure created conflict between those like Anakin Skywalker, who believed in following one's heart, and those like Obi-Wan Kenobi, who adhered to the traditional Jedi teachings. Rey, as the heir to the Skywalker legacy, stands at a crucial juncture where she must not only confront the dark side, but also forge a new path for the Jedi, one that learns from the past but doesn't repeat its mistakes. Rey's journey is unique because she is not trained in the ways of the Jedi from birth, nor is she bound to their ancient traditions. She learns about the Force and its intricacies through trial and error, forming a deeper and more intuitive connection to it. Unlike Luke Skywalker, who was trained by Obi-Wan Kenobi and Yoda, Rey's training comes from personal experience, her bond with the Force, and the teachings of Leia Organa and Luke Skywalker. As she learns to use the Force, Rey comes to understand that the Jedi tradition is not the only path to balance in the Force, and that true strength lies not in controlling the Force, but in understanding it and allowing it to guide her actions. Her encounter with the dark side is crucial in shaping her Jedi philosophy. Rey faces the temptation of the dark side, not only through her encounters with Kylo Ren, but also in the form of her heritage, the bloodline of Palpatine, a dark force in the galaxy. Throughout her struggle, Rey learns that the Jedi path is not about repressing emotions or denying attachments, but about mastering them and using those feelings to bring balance and peace to the galaxy. The Jedi Order has long taught that attachments lead to fear and ultimately to the dark side, but Rey challenges this doctrine. She embraces her feelings and her connections to others, particularly to Leia, Luke, and even Ben Solo. In doing so, she rejects the outdated dogmas of the Jedi that discourage emotional bonds in favor of a more inclusive, holistic view of the Force, one where attachment and love can be seen as sources of strength rather than weakness. Rey's view of the Jedi Order is further shaped by the lessons of Luke Skywalker in The Last Jedi. Luke is hesitant to train Rey, disillusioned with the Jedi Order and its legacy of failure. He believes that the Jedi have failed the galaxy, and his reluctance to engage with Rey's call for help reflects his loss of faith in the Order's teachings. However, Rey's persistence and dedication show Luke that the Jedi are not simply defined by their past mistakes, but by their ability to learn and evolve. Rey's personal growth in The Last Jedi is a catalyst for Luke's own redemption. It is through his spiritual confrontation with Rey that he comes to realize that the Jedi's legacy is not bound to past failures, to their ability to adapt, embrace change, and learn from their mistakes. Rey's philosophy, then, is about not rejecting the Jedi path, but about shaping it anew. She believes in the teachings of the Jedi, but she also sees that the structure of the Jedi Order, its rules and restrictions, must evolve in order to survive in a galaxy that has changed so drastically since the days of the Clone Wars. Rey's journey marks the rebirth of the Jedi. It is not a return to the old Jedi Order. It is a new path forward, one that incorporates balance and compassion into the Jedi Code. The Jedi cannot continue to be an exclusive order, closed off to the galaxy and its challenges. Rey's teachings reflect the need for the Jedi to be more open to others, to forge alliances and work together in the defense of the galaxy. In The Rise of Skywalker, she embodies this new vision of the Jedi by uniting the galaxy against the First Order and the Sith, showing that the Jedi are not meant to be isolated, but united with others in their goal to restore peace. Rey's rejection of the old ways, particularly the Jedi Code's stance on attachments, marks a new chapter in Jedi philosophy, one that embraces the light side of the Force, but not at the cost of personal connections. A key part of Rey's Jedi philosophy is her belief in redemption, not just for herself, but for others. In The Rise of Skywalker, Rey sees the potential for Ben Solo's redemption, just as Luke once saw in his father. When Rey heals Ben Solo, it is not just an act of mercy, it is an act that shows her belief in the possibility of change and growth, even for someone as lost as Kylo Ren. By reaching out to Ben and ultimately choosing to bring him back to the light, Rey demonstrates the Jedi's role as healers of the galaxy, not just warriors. The Jedi must heal, not destroy, a theme that runs deeply in Rey's approach to the Force and her understanding of the Skywalker legacy. One of the most important lessons Rey learns from Leia Organa is the need for compassion in leadership. Leia's legacy is not just as a leader of the rebellion and the resistance, but as a figure who leads through empathy, sacrifice, and hope. Rey's ultimate choice to adopt the Skywalker name signifies the continuation of this legacy of leadership, but not through violence or domination. Rey's Jedi Order will be one of healing, where the Force is used not for war, but for balance and restoration. In Rey's vision, the Jedi will become guardians of peace in a galaxy that is still recovering from the ravages of war. They will no longer be defined by the mistakes of their past or the limitations of their ancient traditions, but by their ability to evolve with the galaxy around them. Rey's legacy as a Jedi, and her rebirth of the Jedi Order, offers the galaxy a future filled with hope. The Jedi Order has long been a symbol of balance, but Rey's understanding of the Force is not one of simply finding equilibrium between the light and the dark. Instead, she sees the Force as something more, something that should be embraced and respected, not controlled or contained. Rey represents a new path forward, a future where the Jedi are not bound by the constraints of their ancient traditions, but guided by the wisdom that comes from experience, choice, and the recognition of our shared humanity. Rey's mysterious connection to the Skywalker legacy is not simply a matter of bloodline or fate. Unlike other key characters in the Star Wars saga, such as Luke Skywalker or Anakin Skywalker, who were born into a legacy of prophecy and destiny, Rey's journey is one of self-determination and choice. In this way, Rey's connection to the Skywalker family transcends traditional concepts of heritage. Her path is defined by the choices she makes, not by the blood that runs through her veins or the history that she inherits. At the core of Rey's journey is the idea that one's legacy is not written by birthright, but by the actions and decisions taken throughout one's life. Rey's relationship with the Skywalkers is complex from the very start. She first encounters Luke Skywalker as an isolated, disillusioned figure. He is a man who has retreated from the galaxy, disheartened by his failures and his role in the rise of Kylo Ren. When Rey first seeks him out on Osh 2, she is filled with anticipation, believing that Luke, the hero of the rebellion and the last of the Jedi, is the answer to her search for identity and purpose. But Luke's response is one of hesitation and doubt. He has abandoned his former ideals, believing that the Jedi are part of the problem in the galaxy's ongoing conflict rather than the solution. This represents a crucial turning point in Rey's journey. Her belief that the Jedi Order is the answer to her quest for identity is challenged. Instead of simply inheriting the Jedi legacy through Luke, Rey must come to understand that the legacy of the Skywalkers is not a burden but a responsibility that she must define for herself. The theme of self-determination runs through Rey's story, especially when she is confronted by Kylo Ren in The Last Jedi. Kylo Ren's offer for Rey to join him and form a new order of the galaxy, one free from the constraints of the Jedi and the Sith, is both tempting and revealing. It offers Rey the chance to cast aside the old ways of the Jedi and Sith and embrace a new future, one that is not constrained by the past. Kylo's offer represents the allure of power and freedom, but Rey rejects it, not out of fear, but out of a profound understanding that true power does not come from ruling or dominating others, but from self-mastery and compassion. Rey's refusal to join Kylo Ren speaks to the core of her identity. She is not defined by her bloodline or her past. She is defined by the choices she makes in the present and the legacy she chooses to carry forward. The revelation in The Rise of Skywalker that Rey is the granddaughter of Emperor Palpatine is a significant moment in her journey, as it directly confronts her fears about her origins. Rey has spent much of her life feeling abandoned and disconnected, with no clear understanding of her heritage. When Kylo Ren informs her that she is nobody, Rey's sense of self is shaken. The idea that she is no one, not a Skywalker, not a Kenobi, not a descendant of any great legacy, leaves her questioning her purpose in the galaxy. However, it is through this moment of self-doubt that Rey is able to embrace her true legacy, not as a descendant of the dark side, but as an heir to the Skywalker name. Her rejection of Palpatine's legacy represents the ultimate act of defiance. By choosing to take on the Skywalker name, Rey becomes the embodiment of the light side of the Force, not because of her bloodline, but because of her choices. In embracing the Skywalker legacy, Rey redefines what it means to be a Skywalker. The Skywalkers have long been defined by their connection to the Force and their struggle against the dark side. Anakin Skywalker, the father of the Skywalker legacy, was believed to be the chosen one who would bring balance to the Force, but his fall to the dark side tarnished that legacy. Luke Skywalker became the symbol of hope, but his own failures and doubts also clouded his legacy. Rey's ultimate role is to bring closure to the Skywalker saga, not by simply inheriting their strengths, but by rejecting their weaknesses. She shows the galaxy that the Skywalker legacy is not one of destiny or fate, but one of choice, hope, and redemption. The final battle between Rey and Palpatine is not just a confrontation between light and dark, but a climactic moment where Rey comes into her own as the true heir to the Skywalker legacy. In this moment, Rey taps into the strength of all the Skywalkers who came before her, Anakin, Luke, Leia, and channels that power to defeat Palpatine. This is the ultimate victory, not of bloodlines, but of personal choices. Rey chooses to embrace the light, despite the darkness of her heritage, and in doing so, she breaks the cycle of violence and destruction that has defined the Skywalker family. By choosing hope, forgiveness, and love, Rey proves that the Skywalker legacy is not a curse, but a gift that she will continue to pass on to future generations. One of the most profound aspects of Rey's journey is how it contrasts with the traditional concept of destiny in Star Wars. Throughout the saga, characters such as Anakin and Luke were bound by prophecy and fate. Anakin as the chosen one who would bring balance to the Force, and Luke as the last hope of the Jedi. These characters were burdened with the weight of the galaxy's future, as their destinies were preordained. Rey, however, is not bound by prophecy. She does not fulfill a destiny set in motion by the Force. Instead, her destiny is shaped by her choices, by her decisions to act for the greater good, to protect the galaxy from the forces of darkness, and to forge her own path. Rey's story is the story of free will, of creating one's own future despite the weight of the past. She proves that legacy is not determined by birthright, but by action. In The Rise of Skywalker, Rey's final decision to adopt the Skywalker name is both a symbolic passing of the torch and a reclamation of the family legacy. Leia Organa, who has always been the heart of the rebellion and the resistance, passes away, leaving Rey as the final embodiment of the Skywalker legacy. In choosing to adopt the Skywalker name, Rey acknowledges that her true connection to the family is not through blood, but through values of hope, redemption, and sacrifice. Rey becomes the new hope for the galaxy, just as Luke was in the past. But unlike Luke, Rey is not burdened by the mistakes and failures of those who came before her. She is free to create her own destiny, free from the weight of prophecy and destiny. By taking on the Skywalker name, Rey demonstrates that legacy is not about what we inherit, but about what we choose to become. Rey's journey through the Star Wars sequel trilogy is fundamentally one of personal discovery, self-determination, and the development of her role within the broader galaxy, particularly in relation to the Skywalker legacy. Unlike many of the iconic figures before her, Rey is not born into a grand prophecy or a destiny that sets the stage for her actions. Instead, she is a woman without a clear past, raised as an orphan on Jakku, scavenging for survival. From this starting point, Rey embarks on a journey to define herself, ultimately aligning herself with the ideals of the Skywalkers, a family whose saga has deeply shaped the galaxy. At first glance, Rey seems disconnected from the Skywalker family. Her parentage is a mystery, and her connection to the Force is a latent power that remains dormant until she touches Anakin Skywalker's lightsaber. This lightsaber is not only a symbol of the Skywalker family, but also the key that unlocks Rey's latent abilities, beginning her path toward discovering who she truly is and her role in the galaxy. The lightsaber's legacy, having been wielded by both Anakin and Luke Skywalker, is the thread that begins to weave her into the Skywalker narrative. Anakin's lightsaber symbolizes both the rise and fall of the Skywalker family, carrying with it the weight of the Empire's destruction and Luke's redemption. When Rey accepts it as her own, she begins to understand that the Skywalker legacy is not just about inheriting power, but about choosing how to wield that power for the greater good. Her relationship with the Force is not one that is grounded in traditional Jedi teachings. In the beginning, Rey is largely unaware of the full scope of her connection to the Force. Unlike Luke Skywalker, who underwent intense training under Obi-Wan Kenobi and Yoda, Rey is largely self-taught. She learns her abilities through instinct, trial, and error. However, this lack of formal training does not make her any less capable of harnessing the Force. Rey's journey is not about following the Jedi tradition to the letter, but about forging a path based on personal understanding of the Force, guided by her innate compassion and desire to help others. The idea that the Jedi can be reborn through Rey's experiences is both revolutionary and reflective of her personal journey. She is not confined by the dogmatic rules that have held the Jedi Order back for centuries. The Jedi have always been portrayed as an order that prides itself on self-control and detachment from emotions, seeing these traits as the source of their strength. But Rey sees things differently. Her experience with the dark side, particularly in The Last Jedi, reveals to her that attachments, the very thing the Jedi have been trained to avoid, are not inherently evil. She acknowledges that love, empathy, and attachment are essential to what it means to be human. These emotions are what make Rey more than just a warrior. They are what define her as a true heir to the Skywalker name, where sacrifice and compassion have been central values since Anakin's redemption. Rey's rejection of the Jedi Code's restrictions and her willingness to embrace attachments and emotions allow her to redefine the role of the Jedi in a galaxy that has long been dominated by the cycle of war and violence. By the time Rey confronts Palpatine, she understands that the Force is about more than just balance between light and dark. It's about empowerment through self-awareness and choice. In that final confrontation, when Rey is faced with the choice to strike Palpatine down and assume his power, she rejects the temptation of the dark side, fully embracing the Skywalker legacy of selflessness. Rey's choice is not driven by fate or prophecy. It is a conscious decision to reject the path that so many others have walked before her. She will not repeat the mistakes of Anakin Skywalker, whose fall to the dark side was influenced by fear of loss and attachment. Rey understands that true strength comes from the light side of the Force, where self-sacrifice and compassion triumph over domination and control. What makes Rey's path especially unique is that she is not the chosen one. The prophecy that has defined the Skywalker family legacy is not hers to fulfill. The chosen one prophecy always carried with it the idea that Anakin Skywalker would bring balance to the Force, but he failed, consumed by the dark side. Luke Skywalker's role as the last hope of the Jedi was rooted in his ability to redeem his father, and while he succeeded in bringing balance, his self-doubt and reluctance to lead caused him to hesitate when Rey came seeking his guidance. In contrast, Rey is not burdened by these expectations. Her journey is not the fulfillment of a prophecy, but the creation of her own legacy, one that is defined by the choices she makes, not the fate that has been foretold. This makes her a unique figure in the galaxy. She represents the future of the Jedi, a future where legacy is not determined by bloodline or prophecy, but by free will, growth, and self-determination. Rey's embrace of the Skywalker legacy symbolizes her acceptance of the responsibility that comes with power. The Skywalkers have long been marked by internal struggle. Anakin Skywalker, who struggled with fear and anger, Luke Skywalker, who wrestled with his own doubts, and Leia Organa, who fought against the oppressive forces of the Empire and later the First Order. Rey, by taking on the Skywalker name, acknowledges that their legacy is not about avoiding failure but learning from it and moving forward. She becomes the embodiment of the Skywalker's values, forging a new path as a Jedi who will carry the mantle of the Order forward with compassion and integrity. Rey's actions also resonate with the galactic community as a whole. The galaxy, still recovering from the turmoil of the Empire's reign and the First Order's rise, needs a figure like Rey, a figure who symbolizes hope in a time of great darkness. Her leadership as a Jedi is not simply about defeating evil, but about creating a new vision for the galaxy, one in which the people of the galaxy can live free from fear, cooperate across factional lines, and embrace change. Rey represents the possibility that the galaxy can move forward from the past rather than being trapped in the cycles of violence that have defined it. Her role is pivotal, not just in defeating the Sith, but in forging a new future, one where the Jedi are no longer confined by outdated rules and rigid traditions, but where they can act as guides for a galaxy that is rebuilding. As Rey returns to the desert planet of Tatooine at the end of The Rise of Skywalker, her decision to bury Luke and Leia's lightsabers in the sands marks the final chapter of the Skywalker saga. She carries their legacy forward by embracing the Skywalker name and forging a new path for the Jedi, one that is not shackled by the past, but is rooted in the light of hope and redemption. By doing so, Rey not only completes the Skywalker saga, but sets the foundation for the future of the Jedi, ensuring that their legacy will live on in a galaxy that is ready to embrace the changes she represents. As Rey's journey progresses through the sequel trilogy, her final role as the Guardian of the Force and the heir to the Skywalker legacy provides a profound conclusion to the saga, but also sets the stage for the next chapter in the galaxy's future. While much of the focus throughout Rey's story has been on her internal struggle with her identity and her battle against the dark side, the true essence of her role lies in her choices and the legacy she chooses to build. Her acceptance of the Skywalker name, her rejection of the past's destructive cycles, and her commitment to a new, inclusive understanding of the Force serve as a roadmap for how the galaxy may rebuild itself after centuries of war, oppression, and conflict. Rey's journey from scavenger to savior is not just about her personal growth, but also about the broader evolution of the Jedi Order. One of the most significant aspects of her transformation is how she chooses to redefine the Jedi for a new generation. The traditional Jedi Code, which has often been seen as an inflexible set of rules aimed at maintaining peace and balance, is deeply ingrained in the history of the Skywalker family, from Anakin's fall to Luke's rejection of the old ways. However, Rey's experiences and her personal understanding of the Force reveal the limitations of these teachings. Rey's interactions with the Force and her connections to others, particularly Leia Organa, Luke Skywalker, and even Ben Solo, show her that true balance in the Force does not come from eliminating attachments or denying the human experience, but from embracing love, compassion, and understanding. In The Last Jedi, Rey's interaction with the Force is explored through her intense training with Luke. But while Luke represents the traditional Jedi teachings, Rey quickly learns that the path of a Jedi cannot simply be about following doctrine. It must also be about adapting to the world around them. Unlike Luke, who struggled with his family legacy and the weight of being the last hope for the Jedi, Rey does not succumb to the same doubts. She pushes forward, embracing both the light and dark sides of her power, learning to balance them within herself. When Luke Skywalker finally confronts his past mistakes and realizes that the Jedi must evolve, he comes to understand that Rey's journey is not just about following in his footsteps, but about learning from the past and creating a new path for the Jedi. Rey's ability to forge her own path as a Jedi sets her apart from the previous Skywalkers, whose destinies were always marked by prophecy or preordained fate. Anakin Skywalker was the chosen one, but his journey ended tragically as he succumbed to the dark side. Luke Skywalker, the last hope of the Jedi, struggled with his own failings and self-doubt, ultimately rejecting the Jedi's teachings to a certain degree. But Rey's journey is unique because she is not bound by the traditions of the past. She is not the chosen one, nor is she the last hope of a dying order. She is Rey, an individual who chooses to forge her own legacy based on the values of the Jedi, as well as the teachings of the Skywalkers. One of the most pivotal moments in Rey's journey comes when she is faced with the opportunity to kill Kylo Ren Ben Solo and accept the power of Palpatine. This is the moment where Rey must decide whether to embrace the dark side, the same side that has haunted the Skywalkers for generations, or to embrace the light. It is here that Rey's true strength is revealed. She rejects the easy path of power and chooses to forgive rather than destroy. Her decision to spare Kylo Ren and offer him redemption mirrors the choices made by Luke Skywalker with Anakin, showing that the Skywalker legacy is not about revenge or domination, but about the possibility of change and redemption. This act represents the ultimate rejection of the Sith, who believe in the power of control and fear. Rey's final confrontation with Palpatine, and her ultimate victory, is not about defeating evil through destruction, but about embracing the Skywalker legacy of selflessness and sacrifice. When Rey faces Palpatine, she does so not as a Jedi alone, but as the heir to the Skywalker name, and with the wisdom of her mentors, Luke, Leia, and even Ben Solo, guiding her. Her victory is not about her physical strength or power in the Force, but about her commitment to hope and compassion. By rejecting the darkness and choosing to stand for the light, Rey completes the Skywalker saga, not by following the same path that Anakin and Luke walked, but by creating a new path that defines her as a Jedi in her own right. Rey's choice to adopt the Skywalker name at the end of The Rise of Skywalker is both a symbolic and literal passing of the torch. It marks the end of an era, but also the beginning of a new one. Rey is not simply the heir to the Skywalker bloodline, she is the heir to the values that the Skywalkers fought for throughout their lives, values of hope, sacrifice, and redemption. By choosing to take the Skywalker name, Rey honors the legacy of the family, but she does not replicate their mistakes. Instead, she redefines the legacy for the galaxy's future. The Jedi Order that Rey will build is not one based on the rigid traditions of the past, but one rooted in balance, compassion, and the power of choice. The final scene of Rey standing in front of Luke's homestead on Tatooine and declaring herself as Rey Skywalker encapsulates the core of her character arc. It is not simply a rejection of her Palpatine lineage, but an embracing of the Skywalker legacy that she has forged herself. Rey's journey is a testament to the idea that legacy is not something that is given to us, but something that we create through our choices. The Skywalkers may have failed in many ways, but their true legacy is in their ability to choose light over dark, hope over despair, and forgiveness over vengeance. Rey's adoption of the Skywalker name is also a statement of the galaxy's future. The Skywalkers have always been at the center of the galaxy's greatest struggles, and their actions have shaped the fate of countless individuals. But with Rey's decision to claim the Skywalker legacy, she sets a new course for the future, one where self-determination, hope, and compassion are the guiding principles. In the end, Rey Skywalker is not just the last of the Skywalkers, she is the first of a new generation, one that will carry the Skywalker legacy forward into an uncertain but hopeful future. Rey's journey culminates not just in her personal acceptance of the Skywalker legacy, but also in her reshaping of the Jedi Order and its role in the galaxy. This process is pivotal to understanding the broader implications of her character arc and the impact she has on the galaxy's future. Throughout the Star Wars saga, the Jedi Order has always been a symbol of balance in the Force, its teachings rooted in self-discipline, detachment, and a commitment to peace. However, the Jedi's strict code has often led to rigidity, fear of attachments, and an inability to adapt to the changing needs of the galaxy. Through Rey's actions, She brings a new understanding of what it means to be a Jedi, one that challenges the dogmas of the past while embracing the core principles of the Force: compassion, selflessness, and balance. Rey's evolution as a Jedi is rooted in the lessons she learned from her encounters with Luke Skywalker and Leia Organa, but it is also influenced by her relationship with Ben Solo, Kylo Ren. Rey's unique position as a Skywalker by choice, and not by birthright, allows her to see the flaws in the Jedi teachings and reject the rigid structures that have traditionally defined the Order. One of the most significant lessons that Rey learns is that attachments and emotions, specifically love, compassion, and forgiveness, are not the pathways to the dark side, as the Jedi have traditionally believed. Instead, these emotions are the very forces that give Rey the strength to confront the darkness and bring balance to the galaxy. Unlike Anakin Skywalker, who fell to the dark side due to his fear of loss and attachment, Rey's embrace of her connections to others strengthens her. Her bond with Leia Organa, in particular, becomes a pillar of her growth, as Leia's teachings guide Rey toward balance and compassion. Through Leia, Rey learns that being a Jedi does not require renouncing love, but rather channeling that love in a way that brings healing and hope to the galaxy. This understanding is crucial when Rey faces Palpatine in the final battle. Rather than giving in to the temptation of absolute power, as Palpatine would have wanted, Rey chooses to honor the sacrifices of the past and embraces the light, guided by her connection to the Skywalkers. In The Rise of Skywalker, Rey's journey is defined by her ability to resist the dark side, not just because of her inherent strength in the Force, but because of her compassion for others. Her love for Leia, her respect for Luke, and even her understanding of Ben Solo's inner conflict fuel her decision to take the Skywalker name as her own. This choice is significant because it is a symbol of Rey's belief that the Jedi can evolve into something greater. Legacy is no longer about bloodlines or fate, it is about who we choose to be and the responsibility we take on for shaping the future. Rey's ability to forgive Ben Solo and bring him back to the light reflects her understanding that the Jedi must be healers of the galaxy, not just warriors. It is through this act of redemption that Rey completes the Skywalker legacy, not by inheriting it, but by redefining it. One of the most profound changes Rey brings to the Jedi Order is her approach to balance. In the past, the Jedi sought balance by controlling their emotions and suppressing their desires. This led to a detachment from the galaxy and a failure to understand the complexities of human relationships. The Jedi, particularly in their last years, were out of touch with the galaxy they were sworn to protect. Rey's vision of balance, however, is not about repressing emotions, but about understanding and mastering them. Her Jedi philosophy emphasizes that true balance comes from the ability to act with compassion without succumbing to the temptation of the dark side. Rey's ability to accept her attachments and use them as a source of strength is a reflection of her understanding of the Force as something fluid and ever-changing, not something that must be strictly controlled. In her final moments on Tatooine, when Rey stands before the twin suns and declares herself as Rey Skywalker, she signals the beginning of a new era. The Skywalker name, long associated with the epic battles between the light and the dark, is now redefined. Rey's Skywalker legacy is one of peace, healing, and growth, not defined by warfare and destruction, but by the choices she made to bring balance to the galaxy. This transformation is also symbolized by the act of burying Luke and Leia's lightsabers, the weapons that once represented the Jedi's power, in the sands of Tatooine, signaling that the Force of the Skywalkers is no longer about dominance, but about healing and reconciliation. Rey's choice to bury the lightsabers is significant because it marks the end of an era and the beginning of a new one. The Jedi, as they were, are gone, and Rey is now responsible for creating a new order, one that will not be bound by the mistakes of the past, but will learn from them. The new Jedi will no longer be defined by strict codes or emotional detachment, but by their ability to connect with others, to embrace love, and to use their powers not to dominate, but to protect and heal. This is the true legacy of the Skywalkers, one that Rey is uniquely positioned to carry forward. Rey's actions at the end of the Rise of Skywalker also serve as a metaphor for the galaxy's future. After the defeat of the Sith, the galaxy is left with the task of rebuilding and healing from years of war and oppression. Rey's leadership will be essential in this rebuilding process as she carries the legacy of the Skywalkers forward. Her understanding of the Force will be a guiding light for the new generation of Jedi, but also for those who have lived through the horrors of war. Rey represents the hope that the galaxy can find a way to move forward from its past without forgetting the lessons it has learned. Her path is one of compassion, growth, and balance, and it is through these values that the galaxy will heal. As the last of the Skywalkers, Rey's legacy will be defined by her actions, not by her bloodline. She will be remembered not for her strength in battle, but for her courage to defy expectations and create a new future for the Jedi Order. Rey's journey shows that legacy is not about the lineage we are born into, but about the choices we make in our lives. Her story proves that anyone, regardless of their heritage, has the potential to shape the galaxy's future by choosing to act with compassion, hope, and selflessness. Rey's redefinition of the Skywalker legacy and her eventual acceptance of her role as the heir to this legacy represents not just the conclusion of the saga, but also the beginning of a new era for the galaxy. This shift is pivotal in how Star Wars has evolved from a saga centered around the prophetic journey of the Skywalker family to one that acknowledges the galaxy's need for healing, growth, and change. Rey's story, much like the galaxy she inhabits, is one of transformation, and her journey not only redefines the role of the Jedi, but also symbolizes the possibility of hope in the face of overwhelming darkness. Through Rey, we see that the galaxy is not bound by fate, but by free will, that even in the darkest of times, individuals can choose to create a better future. As Rey takes on the mantle of Skywalker, her transformation from scavenger to hero symbolizes the power of self-determination in a galaxy that has long been defined by prophecies and bloodlines. The notion that one's destiny is not determined by where they come from, but by the choices they make, is at the heart of Rey's story. While she may have initially sought answers about her parents and her heritage, she comes to understand that the true power of her identity lies not in what she inherits, but in how she chooses to act. Rey Skywalker is not defined by the legacy of Palpatine, nor is she simply a descendant of great Jedi heroes. She is Rey, a person who chooses the path of light, hope, and compassion, despite the overwhelming darkness that has sought to define her. This redefinition of what it means to be Skywalker is central to the themes of the Rise of Skywalker. By taking the Skywalker name, Rey signals that the legacy of the family is not tied to the past mistakes of its predecessors, but to the values that have endured. It is Luke's belief in hope, Leia's sacrifice, and Anakin's redemption that Rey chooses to honor, not the failures and tragedies that marked the Skywalker family's history. Her acceptance of the name represents the healing of the Skywalker legacy, which was for so long defined by conflict, betrayal, and suffering. Through Rey's actions, the Skywalkers are no longer the family defined by their mistakes, but by the choices they made to fight for hope, forgive, and redeem. At the core of Rey's development is her ability to transcend the narrative of the Chosen One and embrace her own agency. For much of the saga, the Skywalker family has been tied to the prophecy of the Chosen One, who was supposed to bring balance to the Force. Anakin Skywalker, the Chosen One, is a figure whose rise and fall marked the galaxy's shift toward the dark side, and Luke Skywalker inherited the weight of his father's legacy, leading him to a similar point of conflict and struggle. But Rey, unlike her predecessors, is not defined by prophecy. Her connection to the Force is not dictated by destiny, nor is her strength predetermined. Instead, she defines herself by what she chooses to do, by her actions, her decisions, and her commitment to the ideals of the Skywalker family. Rey's rejection of the dark side is also crucial in understanding her relationship with the Skywalkers. The dark side has haunted the Skywalker family for generations. With Anakin Skywalker's fall and Ben Solo's transformation into Kylo Ren serving as stark examples of how the dark side can corrupt even the most powerful individuals. Rey's battle with Kylo Ren and her eventual ability to redeem him speaks to the Skywalker legacy's central theme of redemption, the idea that no one is beyond saving no matter how far they've fallen. When Rey heals Ben Solo, she not only helps him find peace with his past, but also demonstrates that the Skywalker legacy is not about power or dominance, but about love, forgiveness, and the willingness to choose light over dark. Rey's ability to forgive Ben Solo and her rejection of the Sith in favor of embracing the light side of the Force reflects her deep understanding of the true nature of the Force. It is not something to be controlled, but something to be embraced and balanced. Her ultimate victory over Palpatine is the culmination of this belief. Palpatine, the very embodiment of the dark side and the Sith, has spent his life trying to manipulate and control the galaxy. He is a figure of tyranny, seeking to destroy those who oppose him and impose his will upon the galaxy. Rey, on the other hand, chooses not to destroy but to embrace the light, drawing on the strength of the Skywalkers, Luke, Leia, and Ben, to defeat the Emperor. The battle between Rey and Palpatine is not just about the clash of the light and dark sides of the Force, but about the broader idea of legacy. Palpatine's legacy is one of destruction and control, whereas Rey's legacy is one of compassion, forgiveness, and choice. When Rey calls upon the spirits of the past and draws strength from those who came before her, she does not just win the battle, she rewrites the very concept of legacy in the galaxy. Rey's final acceptance of the Skywalker name is the closing of the Skywalker saga, but also the beginning of a new chapter. The Skywalkers have always been at the heart of the galaxy's struggles, but Rey represents a new generation, one that does not simply inherit their problems and failures, but one that learns from them and moves forward. The Skywalker legacy is no longer defined by bloodlines or prophecies, but by the choices made in the face of darkness. Rey's legacy is one that will be passed on to future generations, not because she is a Skywalker by birth, but because she chooses to honor their values and forge her own path. Rey's story also represents a powerful shift in how the galaxy views the Force. The Jedi, as they were tied to rigid codes and traditions that often left them out of touch with the galaxy they were meant to protect. But Rey's vision for the Jedi Order is one that embraces balance and compassion, a vision that is rooted in the understanding that the Force is not a tool to be used for control, but a living energy that connects all things. Rey's embrace of her Force powers is not about mastery or domination, but about healing, self-discovery, and the pursuit of peace. The Jedi Rey will lead will be defined by their ability to adapt to the galaxy's needs, to embrace their emotions and attachments without being consumed by them, and to work together to restore balance, not just to the Force, but to the galaxy at large. Her final stance as Rey Skywalker is a symbolic and literal passing of the torch from the old Skywalker legacy to a new era, one where the Force is used not as a means of control, but as a guide to bring balance to a galaxy that has been torn apart by conflict. The legacy of the Skywalkers will continue through Rey's choices, and it will shape the future of the Jedi Order for generations to come. As Rey solidifies her place within the Skywalker legacy, the galaxy she inhabits begins to change. Her journey, though deeply personal, becomes a beacon for the future of the Jedi, the Force, and the galaxy at large. Her actions in the final chapters of the saga not only define her path, but also symbolize the broader transformation the galaxy undergoes after the fall of the Empire and the First Order. As Rey Skywalker, she represents a new hope, one that is built on the lessons of the past, but also on the choices of the present. Throughout Star Wars, we have seen the Skywalker legacy play a central role in the galaxy's struggles. The Skywalkers have always been connected to the Force in profound ways. Anakin Skywalker, who was believed to be the chosen one, brought balance to the Force through his tragic fall and ultimate redemption. Luke Skywalker embodied the hope of the rebellion, and Leia Organa played a vital role in leading the resistance against tyranny. Yet, these Skywalkers were burdened by the weight of prophecy, fate, and bloodlines. Their actions were often dictated by a larger cosmic plan, one that they were either trying to fulfill or escape. Rey, however, represents something new, a galactic shift away from the idea of predestination and toward the power of individual choice. Rey's unconventional rise to power, her rejection of traditional Jedi codes, and her eventual acceptance of the Skywalker name signify the dismantling of the old order. The Jedi as an institution has long been defined by its dogma, its reliance on rules and restrictions that limit the Jedi's emotional capacity and human connection. The Jedi Order's failure to adapt, to connect with the galaxy they swore to protect, led to their ultimate downfall. Anakin's fall to the dark side was largely due to his fear of loss, a fear that stemmed from the Jedi Code's insistence on emotional detachment. Luke, too, faced the same struggle, torn between following tradition and embracing his emotions. It is Rey's rejection of the rigid Jedi Order that allows her to define the next generation of Jedi, one that is free from the constraints of the past. Rey's decision to embrace her attachments is a key turning point in this transformation. The Jedi Code teaches that attachments lead to fear, and fear leads to the dark side. For Rey, however, her attachments to Leia, Luke, and even Ben Solo are not sources of weakness, but sources of strength. These relationships are what fuel her sense of purpose and allow her to stay grounded in the face of the immense darkness that threatens the galaxy. By embracing love and compassion, Rey shows that these emotions do not make her weak, but rather empower her to fight for others, to defend the innocent, and to heal the galaxy. This is the crux of Rey's Jedi philosophy. Balance is achieved not by repressing emotions, but by understanding and mastering them. The Jedi must learn that their strength comes from compassion, not from detachment. Her battle against Palpatine in The Rise of Skywalker is the culmination of this belief. When Rey faces the Emperor, it is not just a physical confrontation, it is a spiritual and philosophical one. Palpatine represents the dark side in its most manipulative form. He is driven by the need for control, dominance, and fear. His power comes from the subjugation of others. Rey, however, represents the opposite, a force of healing, a force that brings light to the galaxy through compassion, forgiveness, and selflessness. Rey's victory is not just about defeating Palpatine physically, it is about rejecting his ideology and choosing a path of light and balance. By channeling the strength of the Skywalkers, particularly Luke and Leia, Rey proves that the legacy of the Skywalkers is not about bloodlines or destiny. It is about the choices made to defend the galaxy and to lead with love. This victory also marks a significant shift in the galaxy's perception of the Force. The Sith, with their obsession for power, have always seen the Force as a means of control, a tool to be used for domination. The Jedi, for all their wisdom, have often been seen as rigid and disconnected, too focused on maintaining balance at the cost of human connection. Rey's understanding of the Force, however, is rooted in compassion and choice. She rejects the old paradigm, where the Jedi were either isolated or doctrinal, and instead creates a vision of the Jedi that is connected to the galaxy, one where the Jedi are not guardians of an ancient code, but champions of peace who use their power to protect and heal. In this sense, Rey becomes the symbol of a new Jedi Order, one that learns from the mistakes of the past and adapts to the galaxy's needs. Rey's acceptance of the Skywalker name is also a symbolic passing of the torch from the previous generation to the next. The Skywalkers have always been at the heart of the galaxy's struggles, whether it was Anakin's rise and fall, Luke's redemption, or Leia's leadership in the Resistance. But with Rey's adoption of the name, the Skywalker legacy is no longer about bloodlines, it is about values. Rey does not inherit the Skywalker name because of her heritage, but because she chooses to embody the hope and sacrifice that the Skywalkers have always represented. She is not bound by their past mistakes, but instead uses them to shape a better future. By taking the name of Skywalker, Rey redefines the legacy of the Jedi, one that is no longer bound by tradition or prophecy, but is based on individual choice and growth. Rey's story represents a new chapter for the galaxy. The Empire has fallen, the First Order has been defeated, and the galaxy stands on the brink of a new era. But this new era is not one of stagnation or regression. It is a time of healing, rebuilding, and self-discovery. Rey's decision to embrace the Skywalker name and her eventual role as the leader of a new Jedi Order speaks to the future of the galaxy. A future where the Force is understood as a force for good, not for domination. The Jedi Order, as Rey envisions it, will be one that embraces human connection and emotional growth, recognizing that the true strength of the Jedi lies in their ability to connect with others and act selflessly. Her final act, standing before the twin suns of Tatooine, marks the end of one saga and the beginning of another. Rey Skywalker is no longer just a scavenger from Jakku. She is the heir to the Skywalker legacy, not by blood, but by choice. She represents the hope that the galaxy can move forward from the cycles of violence, that it can learn from its mistakes and create a better future. The Skywalker legacy, once marked by tragedy and conflict, is now redefined by Rey's choices. Choices rooted in love, compassion, and the desire to bring peace to a galaxy that has long been torn apart by war. Rey's story reaches its apex in her role as the heir to the Skywalker legacy, a name she chooses to adopt not as an inheritance of blood, but as a symbol of her own choices, sacrifices, and responsibilities. Through her actions, Rey transforms the Skywalker legacy, fundamentally altering its role in the galaxy's future. Where the Skywalkers were once bound by prophecies and preordained destinies, Rey's connection to the family marks a decisive break from the constraints of fate, as she chooses to redefine their legacy based on self-determination, compassion, and hope. This choice shifts the narrative of Star Wars away from the traditional dichotomy of light and dark, focusing instead on the power of personal choice and individual agency in shaping the future. One of the most profound aspects of Rey's leadership and her creation of a new Jedi Order is her ability to adapt the Jedi teachings to fit a galaxy that has fundamentally changed. The Jedi of the past, especially in the prequel trilogy, were portrayed as an order bound by dogma, rules, and detachment, with little understanding of the galaxy's ever-evolving needs. The Jedi, while dedicated to maintaining peace and balance, became too isolated and rigid, unable to adapt to the growing threats of the Sith and the Clone Wars. This detachment ultimately led to their downfall, and Anakin Skywalker's tragic fall to the dark side was a direct result of the Jedi Council's refusal to allow him the freedom to embrace his emotional attachments, particularly to Padme Amidala. In contrast, Rey's Jedi Order will not be defined by emotional suppression or the fear of attachment. Instead, Rey's vision for the future is one where compassion, attachment, and emotional connection are embraced as integral parts of a Jedi's training. Luke Skywalker, despite his wisdom, was ultimately trapped by his own self-imposed detachment from the galaxy and the Skywalker legacy. He sought to reject the Jedi Order because he felt it had failed, largely because of the rigidity of its teachings. Rey, however, does not discard the Jedi teachings entirely. Instead, she incorporates the lessons of the past with the growth and adaptation of the Jedi to fit the galaxy's current needs. Rey understands that strength does not come from eliminating emotions or rejecting attachments, but from mastering them, using them as tools for healing, compassion, and balance. Through Rey's leadership, the new Jedi Order will focus on cultivating Jedi who are rooted in the galaxy's needs rather than an isolated and insular code. Jedi in Rey's Order will not only learn to control the Force, but also to understand the complexities of emotions, relationships, and human connection. Rey Skywalker recognizes that Jedi can be warriors, but they can also be healers, mediators, and leaders in the galaxy. She will teach the next generation of Jedi to act not just for peace, but for the betterment of the galaxy, to be compassionate, to listen, and to forge alliances with the people they serve. Her order will be defined by balance, with the Jedi acting as both protectors and guides, helping the galaxy to find harmony not just within the Force, but among its people. The new Jedi Order Rey envisions will also break free from the old Jedi Code, which emphasized strict detachment and renunciation of personal attachments. Rey's understanding of the Force is not bound by these limitations. In The Rise of Skywalker, Rey's final confrontation with Palpatine showcases her refusal to succumb to fear and control. By embracing her attachments, her love for Leia, her respect for Luke, and her empathy for Ben Solo, Rey ultimately triumphs not through domination or force, but through compassion and forgiveness. She embodies the idea that the true strength of a Jedi does not lie in their ability to control their emotions, but in their ability to use them to protect and heal others. Ben Solo's redemption, which is made possible by Rey's forgiveness, becomes the ultimate expression of the Skywalker legacy, the idea that even the greatest of mistakes can be overcome through self-awareness, compassion, and choice. In Rey's decision to lead the new Jedi Order, she creates a galaxy where the Jedi are no longer a detached order of monks, but an inclusive and compassionate group of warriors and peacekeepers who understand the importance of connection. She will teach her students that the Force is not simply something to be mastered, but something to be lived and understood. Jedi in Rey's Order will be connected to others, able to form bonds without succumbing to the dangers of the dark side. Rey's philosophy teaches that attachments are not inherently dangerous, but that they require self-awareness and control. Jedi will be trained to care for others, to understand their emotions, and to channel their attachment to help, rather than harm, the galaxy. This new understanding of the Jedi's role as servants of peace and compassion will be Rey's greatest legacy, as she empowers the next generation of Jedi to act as protectors of balance and healers of the galaxy. The transformation of the Jedi Order under Rey's leadership is indicative of the larger evolution of the galaxy after the First Order's defeat and Palpatine's fall. The galaxy, which has long been torn apart by war, oppression, and tyranny, now faces the difficult task of rebuilding. Rey Skywalker becomes the symbol of hope for this new era. She is not just the heir to the Skywalker name, but also the embodiment of the galaxy's future. Rey's leadership shows that the galaxy is not bound by the mistakes of its past, but by its capacity for change. Her choice to embrace her legacy, not by following ancient dogmas, but by forging a new path, is symbolic of the galaxy's potential for healing and growth. As Rey stands before the twin suns on Tatooine, she is not simply closing the chapter on the Skywalker saga, but opening a new one. The Skywalker legacy, which has long been defined by conflict and war, is now redefined by hope, healing, and the ability to choose. Rey Skywalker represents the possibility of a new Jedi Order, one that is not rigidly defined by the past, but one that is adaptable and open to the galaxy's changing needs. She will lead the Jedi in a way that emphasizes balance, compassion, and understanding, qualities that will help the galaxy heal and move forward from the scars left by the Empire and the First Order. Her final decision to claim the Skywalker name serves as the final act in her transformation from scavenger to savior, not just of the Force, but of the galaxy. Rey's self-determination, her embrace of compassion, and her rejection of dogma are what will define her legacy. She will be remembered not as the last hope of the Jedi, but as the first of a new generation, a generation that will build upon the mistakes of the past and choose a better future. The Skywalker legacy, once fraught with tragedy and despair, is now redefined by Rey Skywalker, who carries it forward with hope, healing, and love. Rey's journey through the Star Wars saga marks the evolution of both herself and the galaxy she inhabits. Beginning as an isolated scavenger on Jakku, she rises to become the heir to the Skywalker legacy, not through bloodline, but through her own choices, sacrifices, and her steadfast commitment to the light. Her connection to the Skywalkers is not defined by destiny or fate, but by her decision to embody their ideals: hope, redemption, compassion, and self-sacrifice. Through her, the Skywalker legacy evolves from one marked by conflict and tragedy to one that embodies healing, growth, and the potential for change. In rejecting the limitations of the old Jedi Order and embracing a new vision for the Jedi, Rey redefines what it means to be a Jedi in a galaxy that is no longer bound by rigid traditions or prophecies. She recognizes that the Force is not a tool to be wielded for domination, but a living energy to be understood and embraced, leading to balance and peace. Through her ability to embrace attachments, master emotions, and act with compassion, Rey sets the foundation for a new Jedi Order, one rooted in hope and understanding, not fear or detachment. Her ultimate victory over Palpatine is the culmination of her personal growth and the acceptance of her role as the new protector of the galaxy's light. It is through self-determination and the choices she makes, not fate or bloodlines, that she secures the future of the galaxy. By claiming the Skywalker name, Rey steps into a new role, not as a mere heir, but as the shaper of the future, carrying forward the Skywalker legacy in a way that transcends the mistakes and tragedies of the past. Rey's legacy is one of hope and healing. She represents the possibility that no one is ever bound to the mistakes of their past or defined by their heritage. The future is shaped by choices, self-awareness, and the willingness to embrace compassion and forgiveness. Through her actions, Rey not only brings balance to the Force, but also offers the galaxy a chance to heal and move forward from centuries of war, tyranny, and darkness. As she stands before the twin suns on Tatooine, Rey does not just close the chapter on the Skywalker saga, she opens a new one defined by hope, unity, and the shared commitment to building a better future for all. In the end, Rey's journey underscores the central themes of Star Wars, the importance of choice, the redemptive power of love, and the enduring possibility for growth and change. She proves that anyone, regardless of their past, has the capacity to shape their own destiny and make a positive impact on the world. Rey Skywalker is not just the heir to a family legacy. She is the symbol of a new generation, a future where the Skywalker name will live on, not as a burden or a prophecy, but as a beacon of hope for the galaxy.